This tutorial was brought to you thanks to the supporters on the screen. Check out TAPgiles.com to find more Dreams resources, donate to support my work, or engage my services to get private instruction or help on a project one-on-one. In the previous tutorials of this series, links in the description, I showed how to chop up a car and add different lighting effects. Now I'll go into activating different lighting depending on if the car is in darkness and how far the camera is from it. What we can do to make that camera stuff work more easily for the creator that's going to use it is we'll have a chip in here. So let's do that, add a chip in the group like that. So one thing we want is it night? Okay, so let's make a little setup first. So we'll have I'll set up some nighttime logic that will just activate these lights like that. So have like a timeline, and this will be kind of a day-night cycle, but it's just for testing. So if you leave those off, then have a keyframe. We'll just expand it out with pushing up and down, like scaling, but it just changes the duration it lasts in the timeline, and we'll turn these on. But then we can give this like a fade like that. So as it goes over here and the fade goes up, these will change more and more to whatever settings they have, and then down again on the other side. So we can just do that for like that. And some more daytime over here. So it gets darker and darker until nighttime. Then more daytime for a bit. Have it loop. Have a loop so it loops around here. Cool. So that's just for a simple test. And for further testing, we can actually control where the playhead is in this timeline using a value slider. And if we wire that into the playhead, we can give it a percentage between 0 and 1, and it will just stay at that point. So if you want to just test nighttime, we can just wire that in and set it to nighttime. So we'll set it to day for now. That should probably be in that chip. And because it was in the scene and I just dragged the gadget into a chip, it kind of remembers where it was before I moved it. So as well as this stuff being activated, we want to tell the world how nighttime it is. We'll have a value slider, I think it should be okay, that's set to 0, and then we have a keyframe that sets it to 1. Now if we get another value slider, we can see what happens when we power this to different degrees. So if it's 0, it's unpowered, so it's not affecting it. If it's a 1, then it sets it to 1. If you set it to somewhere in between, it'll power this to, it'll kind of half power it, so it will half affect this, and it will make it go to the same value. So we can use that to kind of transmit to anywhere you copy this value slider. Those will all be affected by the same keyframe. So then we just put this into the car, and that's fine, and then we can just put that into the timeline. And give it the same kind of fade-ins as that. We could have used the same keyframe, but I've already got different keyframes, so that's fine. So if you play time, if we remove that first and play time, and then it's going down when it starts getting lighter again. So we can use this to control when the lights come on. So on this side, that's a percentage signal again, so we can use that to control the timeline as well. If we plug it into the playhead, and we can say when it gets to a certain threshold of percentage of darkness, we'll turn this stuff on. Oh, actually, we want a chip for all of the stuff that the lights being on might do, because we're going to add some more logic later. So let's add a microchip. We'll say the lights glow and also the light is cast while the playhead gets to a particular point. So if we just expand it out over there, and we'll say it's half, and then see how that looks. So it turns on when it's kind of dusky, and then in the morning it turns off there. So that's kind of cool. Now in here we can do some extra logic for how far the camera is away from the car. So if we're way over here, it's just going to glow, and if we're like here, then it's going to cast light in front of it, and when we're closer, then it will have that shadow stuff as well. And if we're like super far away, it just won't have any light on it at all, maybe. So first we want to know where the camera is and have a thermo-efficient way of figuring out how far away it is roughly. So that means not using tons of gadgets in every car, but do most of the work outside the car once for wherever the camera is.
In the next part, I show how to emit a trigger zone at the camera's position. Now we can put the zone into a head tracker instead, but the method can still be useful for emitting something at a position.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is emit a piece of logic wherever the camera is, and that should be about it. So if I add a trigger zone, then I'll use an emitter to emit that trigger zone. Oh, it has to be in a group, so let's just add an empty chip. Make sure it's roughly even. I'll add another chip down the bottom because it's going to use the center of this group, which will be here now, as where to emit stuff. If that wasn't there, then the center would be there and the trigger zone wouldn't be in the middle. So it kind of helps to do this, and I'll do that. And you see the dot for where the center of the group is in the middle. So let's tell this emitter where the camera is so that it emits that trigger zone where the camera is. So if we go to gameplay gear and use global settings, in here there's an output for the camera transform. So if we split that, I can explain what that is. It's a splitter gadget. Transform is actually a fat wire, so if you plug it in there, you can actually see there's lots of different values braided into the same cable. So then a splitter kind of splits those out and you can see them all individually. So a transform contains a position in the scene, an orientation, and a scale. So we just want the position, so let's wire that into the scene space transform, or we can actually skip that and use the camera transform into scene space transform. Like that. If we set the emit mode to continuous, then it'll emit every 5.9 seconds or whatever we set this to. If you set it to 0, it'll emit one every frame. So it'll just continually emit. So if I just move around and then pause, those are all the positions. The camera was at all those positions and at those orientations. Like if I twist around and like go like that, those are all the places that the camera was. Now if you go and say the max emitted at once is 1 and recycle is on, then it means when it wants to emit a new one, it has to delete the old one. It's going to recycle the old emitted object. So then you only have one in the scene at once. So if I pause, I now only have one. So now we've got like where the camera is, we can actually use that. If we turn off preview invisibility, this is the object, the original object that is linked to the emitter. When we clicked on that and linked it up, it turned off the original, so that it isn't active in the scene, but we can still see it and edit it. So if we tweak the trigger zone and make the zone size 0, but then have a big fall off like that, then if you play time so it's emitted, you can see it's actually 10 times as big as the original gadget, because when you add a new gadget, then by default it's a tenth scale. So when it emits, it's going to emit it at 1:1 scale, so it's going to be huge. But that doesn't really matter. It just means the size of that fall off is actually going to be even bigger than that. It's going to be 330 meters or something. So we could reduce that, and it will still reach quite a way. That should be looking for a tag to say how far the camera is away from it. So if we have a tag in here, so we called that tag camera proximity, and we'll have this look for that tag using up and down on the D-pad. So now if we play time, you can see it's got like a bar graph on the front of it, and if we go further and further away, that bar graph is smaller. And if we look at this is what that is representing, this output. So as we get closer to wherever that tag is, which is actually the position there, if we get further and further away, it's going to get dimmer like that. So now wherever that tag, one of these tags is, so we can just copy that into there. So now we know how far the camera is from that spot there, the front of that chip gadget, because that's the default. That's where that the tag will use as its location. So we can use that to say what stage of this stuff should work. So in fact, we'll take this chip out and we'll put keyframe in there that will turn on the chip, have the chip off. So now the chip is off until the playhead gets to here, and then the chip turns on. And we'll just expand it out as before. So first step is it has to be dark enough. Second step is you have to be close enough for different things to happen. So if we use another timeline, because this sends out a percentage of how far through that fall off of the trigger zone we're at. So if we plug that into there, I can show you. Let's make it perpetually night. Let's put it around there, and then I can play time. So that's how far it gets before it's not going to do anything. And then we want it to start glowing when we're maybe here, around the 3-second mark, and then start casting shadows here around the 6 mark. So let's do that. Yeah, so let's just put these in at different spots in here. That's the lights glowing, that's the light itself. So we can just stagger these, and then so from here it's not going to cast shadows, but then we'll have a keyframe that activates further in when you're closer that turns on cast shadows. And make sure these like fall off the end like that, so that if the playhead is all the way at the end and you're very close, they still get powered. So because we're really far away, there's nothing there. And as we creep closer, it glows. We can even have that fade like that, so it becomes more glowy instead of it suddenly bursting on. And we can add that to that as well. And as we get closer and closer, now it's casting shadows for that little notch out the front and back. So that's kind of cool.
Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new. Go to patreon.com/TAPgiles to get 5 hours of tutorials early for $3. Here's a preview of what you can learn if you choose to become a supporter.